Welcome to the Echo Chamber brought to you by Elgato Wave, and I'm joined by some really famous people on stream here today. We're here to talk about, the upcoming MDIs, the War Within Mythic Plus, but I'm joined by Gingy, Mirez, and Hopeful. My name is Quasi, I'm your host. But guys, how has, the War Within launch, how's Season 1 been for you folks?
Who wanna go first?
Mirez, you might be muted, by the way.
Yeah, Maris is muted, bro. You can't.
You're muted on the thing.
Man, we had rehearsals for this reason, but yeah.
I mean, I can take it while Maris fixes his
Sure.
his problems. I mean, the War Within. I mean, I've been happy with it generally. I think there's been a lot of good things this expansion, and I'm actually enjoying the game at the moment. But I gotta say, maybe a little bit too many tuning changes, a little bit of too much like imbalancing this expansion compared to normal, which it does looks like they're trying to adjust with the frequent changes every single week. But I can imagine now that we're talking about MDI, it can be annoying when we're getting a lot of changes like this right before cups and whatnot, and then maybe having to adjust the meta, or maybe certain pulls were possible, but now all of a sudden you're going to do this pull without the same amount of damage next time, and things like that can cause some issues for sure.
Right, and we'll come back to that because I think it goes back to, what are the specs as meta, and I know like Gingy, Mirez, you folks have been trying out different mains and specs on stream, so we'll get to those questions in a bit. But Mirez and Hopeful, how have you found, the launch and the new season?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you now. Perfect.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, yeah, no, it was amazing. I loved leveling 24 characters, then going into the race. Yeah, the race was amazing. I mean, actually, I think the bosses were really good. Sadly, we lost, of course, but the race and the bosses were pretty good. And now we're suffering high keys a little bit, like you said already. We can get back to that later. But I think so far it has been pretty good. I'm really enjoying it.
Awesome. Hopeful?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing for me. Kind of hectic going straight from the race and then having like a 1 week break straight to MDI practice. But I think overall it's been pretty good.
Very nice. And that's a great segue because before we talk about like, the meta, the classes, what our predictions are, I would like to start with just the MDI as a topic, right? Because I think the big news, obviously, Mirez and Gingy, you guys have won many titles under the MDI, and you guys are basically taking a break, for a while. But I just want to ask you, like, do you feel that competitive itch? Is it a temporary kind of break? It might be a tough question putting you on the spot, but I'd love to just get your thoughts around where your head is.
Yeah. So a part of me is still not done with competing, but we were in the situation, right, where our tank has lost the motivation to compete in the MDI, and we lost our healer as well. And it's like we've had the same core and the same team dating all the way back from BFA when we initially started, with only making one slight change, which was clicks and fragments. So you build up a lot of things because it's knowing the teammates. It's like everyone bringing something to the table. It's the synergy and the systems that you implement, the way you figure out the keys and all of the built up knowledge from previous MDIs, which is a big reason why we had the results that we did. So rebuilding a new team is a lot of work, and that's kind of where I'm not sure if that's what we want to do in the future, but can't say for certain. For now, we're not gonna be competing, but we'll see if that changes.
And how does that feel, by the way? I'm just curious because obviously MDI, like, practice is kind of grueling. You guys are in there, I don't know, more than 12 hours every day figuring out pulls. Now that you finally get a chance to kind of play live keys, take a step back, are you enjoying your break, or how are you finding live keys versus just MDI precs?
I mean, I can take that. I mean, I personally, I'm having a great time. I really enjoy not going from progress. Like Oppo said, progress 1 week break into MDI practice, and I'm just in full pain. Right now, I stream like 8 hours per day. Then I go out. You can go out for dinner. You can have a little bit IRL situation. You can fix things, whatever you want. It is quite nice, I must say. And of course, also to follow up on the other question, I also want to still compete somehow, maybe, and probably want to look for something for TGP. But I mean, I don't know what is going to happen or when it's even going to happen at this point. So yeah, we will see.
Right, very awesome. And hopeful, obviously, you're straight into practice. And this is a question not just to hopeful, I think to the three of you. I've noticed in the WoW community, there's this kind of pattern where people will say like they complain about being in MDI jail. They kind of like they hate doing the reps, and then every time they say they retire, they come back next season. So kind of explain to the audience what is this like love-hate relationship with competing in the MDIs? Like why do people like keep coming out of retirement to keep trying their hand at the title?
I personally think people just like really like to compete, and then like they say they don't want to do MDI ever again towards the end of MDI practice when they're like they already play 12 hours a day for a couple weeks, and then they take like a 3-4 week break and they're like, oh, I can do this again, no problem. But like before they were saying they couldn't do it again, that's what I think happens.
I swear it's because we live in the game and there's nothing else to do. If you weigh the options, you see like MDI practice with a team, and then you have great keys going on. And on the other hand, you look at the weekly keys plus 10 or the high keys with pucks, and you're like, man, I would love to go back to MDI and right now. So I think that's also that's a factor for me. Every time we came out of MDI and I was like, let's start doing 10 weekly keys on my alts to get gear back, I was in full despair that it was not the MDI routes or the MDI team. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would like to add to that as well. I think if you are a competitor and you like it, especially in Hopeful's case, right? Like now that he just recently joined us in the world's first rating, you are going to be busy in the game. So if you do like that, if you have like something to do, you're just going from progress into MDI. We know there's a TGP coming this season as well. You are not going to have a lot of break. And then after that TGP, we're going to go into the next progress as well. So there's going to be a lot of content for the competitors, which is great, right? For those who loves competing. But it is also pretty intense because it is many hours of gaming, right? Like I think many of the teams are doing at least 12-hour sessions per day. So you just live in the game pretty much.
Right. And before we dive into like the War Within Season 1, Mythic Plus related comms and whatnot, I just, all three of you here are pretty much legends in MDIs, right? So I just want to kind of get your sense around forming a team, like for Mythic Plus. It's not just related to the MDIs, but I think this broader topic is what a lot of people are trying to get into in Mythic Plus right now, especially this season is so challenging. People are trying to form pre-mates. You guys are title winners. Any advice you have for people out there trying to form a team? Like, what do you look for other than skill, right? We all know skill is like the hygiene factor. But what are you looking for beyond skill when it comes to forming a team?
I mean, you can take it.
I can say, I think one of the things is that you need to have fun with people playing, even if it's maybe not the best option. Let's say, I don't know, you play with someone that maybe doesn't play the super meta class or is not going to reroll insta, but you at least vibe with him and have fun playing with him. I'm pretty sure that's worth a lot. And especially if you play multiple hours per day, it can't be full like hatred towards each other or like not fun. That's the idea, yeah.
Let me ask you a bit more about that, Miras, because I was watching you, Gigi, Robin, and Kush kind of like memeing in Siege of Borealis the day before, right? Where Kush kind of like got on a cannon and he took the res and he died. You guys had like I think a 30 minutes debrief on like whether he should take the res, watch his POV, and I get that part of it is like having fun and banter, but how do you guys kind of like transit from like banter in keys to like, okay, this is serious? Do you guys just like all switch like into a serious mode when okay the pool's difficult, like? Or is it constant banter throughout? Because I think your team dynamic is pretty interesting there. I just want to get your thoughts around that.
I mean, I think Mike has more to say to this. Because, I mean, for example, for me and like Mike, we have been playing for a long time. And in the MDI team, we have been bantering all the time, most of the time. Same with Robin. And we have just been yelling at each other, random things and whatnot. And Kush procs of these things as well. It's great, yeah. But then Mike tried at the Siege of Borealis. I was like, guys, we need to focus up. And I swear, I think when Mike said that, everyone started not bantering anymore, but then was the positive banter. And when someone did something, like Mike did like a roar, and we're like, oh, Mike, great roar. Yeah, keep that going. And I don't know. It went in both directions, but I think we also can swap it. Or like, if someone dies, it's most of the time no memes, and we keep it a little bit more stable. Yeah.
I think it also depends on like what you're doing right now, right? Like, I mean, that was a key that we were trying to, I think 2 chests or 3 chests or something was just to build a key. Versus like when it's a key that actually like matters, especially in MDI, doing games, you're not memeing, right? You're in the zone, you're focusing. But doing practice, if you're playing together so much, you cannot be full focus for that many hours. There's bound to be some memes. But yeah, I think the team dynamic is very important. If you're spending so much time together, you need to at least not hate each other, right? But I think that's also something you build up. And I think that was our strong point as well, is that we could be very direct with each other when it came to improving the runs. And people never really took personal offense or got tilted or anything like that. Because we weren't just like teammates anymore. We were, we're close friends. And you can say whatever you want to each other. And you don't really get upset, right? But it gets us to the goal faster. And I think that's important.
Right. Awesome. Let's kind of transit into the War Within Season 1 Mythic Plus, which is really the meat, I think, of this episode. A bit of predictions about the upcoming MDIs, what are some of the meta and whatnot. Let's start with the meta, because I feel like, Miraz, Jinji, you folks have been kind of experimenting with different specs on stream. I know, Jinji, you were previously Boomy, and then now you're playing an Augmentation Evoker. Let's start with, I guess, the DPS comp, because I think that's something after the balancing patches, 11.05, there's a lot of like bugs and whatnot. But have you guys kind of homed in on, number one, is Augmentation Evoker compulsory? Number two, kind of what are the other two DPS roles if Augmentation is, pretty much compulsory? How do you guys think about it? And hopefully we'll love to get your thoughts as well. Yeah.
I'm gonna leave most of it to them probably, because I think my team's scared I'm gonna leak a bunch of stuff from practice. So
Fair enough.
I'll just say, I think Aug's okay. I mean, you saw people play Aug in one of the time trial keys. So, but other than that, I'm pretty sure there's so many specs you can play. I don't know. There's like at least a dozen specs that are probably going to be meta and you'll be playing. I'm not sure.
Fair enough. So to Mirez and Jinji then, like, because maybe there's no like conflict of interest. From a spectator standpoint, a neutral standpoint, like, what are you predicting over here when it comes to the meta for the MDI?
I mean, meta and MDI and TTP is two different things, right? So when you're pushing high keys on live, you get a lot more augmentation value. I'm sure when you look at Necrotic Wake and you see the Augmentation Evoker, they're utilizing some Waystone tech and whatnot, which is probably a good reason why you'd bring Augmentation Evoker in that dungeon. And that's why you have done Holy DK as well, which is probably doing massive pulls, right? But if you're looking at like high keys, when you're doing a little bit less, and you need more prior damage, the boss fights are a little bit more extended. They don't just melt. You have a class like Enhancement Shaman, which does a lot of good prior damage, right? You have Assassination Rogue as well, which has a crazy good damage profile, similar to what Mage Strength has been known for, right? With Fire Mages being able to do AoE damage while it's cleaving. And they're just good they're just good specs for that reason, and they're speeding up the dungeons. So I think Rogue is really strong, Inha is really strong, and then you have the Frost DK as well, which I would probably say is one of the stronger specs as well. It got hit with a nerf. I think Inha and Asa is like the strongest specs currently, and there's definitely some swaps around with the Unholy DK coming in if you need really big AoE. But Unholy DK is more of an MDI. You see some people play it in Arakara high keys, but generally, it's more of an MDI thing. And then, for MDI specifically, I couldn't say if someone's sneaking in like a different specs for a certain dungeon. Who knows? The MDI teams usually come up with stuff like that, like a sneak spec that no one thought about for certain dungeons. That can happen, especially with the recent buffs, right? I don't know if Warlock is good now. I just saw buffs on WoW. Maybe it's good. Who knows? So maybe that happens.
I've seen both the Warlock and Uldaman before, Maybe he's coming back.
True.
Maybe, who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe secret tech. Yeah.
No, but yeah.
Yeah, Miras, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say what Mike is saying is true. I think the best part about it is that in high keys, so many classes are also limited to defensives and whatnot. And in MDI, it's never a case like you slam the whole keyboard and it's fine because the pull dies either way. So, I mean, hopefully we see some fun classes.
Yeah. Just to kind of pick your brains while we're talking about classes. So I think the other big kind of questions that people are having is essentially the healer spot, right? Like, Rastosham's kind of dominating live keys, but this priest is kind of like rising really, really quickly. How do you guys think about like this priest, Rastosham, and maybe even like the tank role? Like, what are some of is Prop Paladin like clearly ahead? What are you guys thinking about it?
Are you meaning? Are you talking like high keys in general right now, or in MDI?
I think for the MDIs, like, would we see like Disprees or Resto Shams kind of dominate as well, or like how are you thinking about that?
Oh, I mean, I'm not sure about the healers, but at least for tanking, like Prot Paladin, I don't think it's an MDI class, to be honest. I mean, potentially in some dungeons, but most of the time in MDI, you want maybe probably a, Warrior, maybe if you play melee comp, but most of the time, Vengeance Demon Hunter brings so much value with the Chaos Brand and the utility and CC, and they also have very high AoE burst with the face card Vengeance. So, I don't know, I think you will see a lot of Vengeance Demon Hunters in MDI, personally, especially in the dungeons where there's a lot of casters. So like, I guess, Arakara, Grimbatol, or whatever, right? And for healers, to be honest, I swear healer does not matter. I feel like in MDI, in high keys, healing barely matters almost. It feels like he needs to heal the things that, like the healing checks, right? But other than that, there's just like random damage and you heal up slowly. So you probably pick Disc or Druid, whatever gives you the most damage, or Shaman. So whatever fits the comp the most for the raid buff, probably in MDI, I would say, yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
If you bring the DPS Shaman, you usually swap away from the rest, though. And I think I saw people as well in the MDI time trials to speak about that. A lot of teams started off with Resto Druid, and then of course they went Dispriest, probably to get some Fleshcrafter value, I'd imagine, or something, for the last two bosses, and that probably what gave them a little bit of extra time there towards the end of the time trials. But yeah, I think Resto Druid for the Mark of the Wild, good single target damage, could be good in MDI.
Sounds good. And I know since hopeful you can't speak too much about like your predictions and whatnot, let me just ask you a more general question, and Miraz and JG, feel free to jump in here. So what do you guys think about the dungeon pool for season 1? Because I think it's like a highly contentious thing. A lot of people kind of hate, like, I guess, Siege of Borealis when they announced it in season 4. And then, there's a lot of janky dungeons. Like, I saw a hilarious Dawnbreaker bug where, the Spirit Link totem was flying off screen on Twitter. But, like, what do you guys think about the dungeon pool for season 1?
I personally don't like it because they're going with one direction where, like, they want every poll to be interactive and fun. Like, this poll, you have, like, a couple things to deal with. But I think most of the people who have a problem with that just want to pull everything and just AoE it down. So I think that's the two different, like, directions that people want. Like, a lot of the players just want to AoE everything, and Blizzard wants to make each pack fun and interactive,
Fair enough. And maybe I'll direct this question to Miraz, because I remember you were streaming beta, and I can't remember who clipped it. I think it was THD who clipped your stream, and it was something like, I thought, like, the mechanics in the War Within, and it was just like a shit ton of like overload of mechanics. But more specific to Miraz first, and then Gingy later, like, do you guys like this new direction of where dungeons are heading? Because you guys been competing for so long, you've seen so many dungeon pools. What do you think about this new direction for Mythic Plus dungeons?
I mean, I must say, I think the direction of the dungeons is probably not the wrong idea what Blizzard has. If they want to make it like also with less affixes, and the dungeon needs to be like there's something to do more or less. But I think the big issue is that how the dungeons are designed is just or how the dungeons are played is just boring in a lot of ways. That you just go in. City of Threats is the prime example, right? You have some options at the beginning, and then after that you just have a 15-minute one direction dungeon where nothing happens, and you're like, oh, I mean, that's great, I guess. I think that's mainly the issue for me personally. But in terms of dungeon design, that they want more people to kick and whatnot, I don't think it's bad for the current situation. But I can see an issue for newcomers in the game, that they have no fucking clue what's going on. And they're like, go in, they send the AoE stun, and then 2 people flame them because, bro, you just stunned my kick, yeah? And then the casts go off and they're just all dying. I don't know. I think it's a little bit weird, and there should maybe be a small tweak on how stuns interact with interrupts. That maybe that when you stun it or disrupt the target, that they take like a 2-second lockout before they cast again, or a little bit of a leeway here to not make it so when actually, for example, Mike currently as Evoker, he does Eruption and I kick into it and it just champions for the next 15 seconds and they'll have kick again.
Upheaval.
Oh, sorry, upheaval, yeah. Upheaval, and it's just weird, I think. I think that is one of the main things that I dislike, but the rest is, it's understandable why the direction Blizzard is going to, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to add as well. I think when it comes to high keys, it seems like it's a lot more about tank deaths than it is about like DPSers dying most of the time. If I think back about my personal planning in the TGP, versus like how easy it is to just go in and wing it and then not dying. I would say that it seems a lot easier from a DPS perspective to play in the War Within than it used to be, but it's a lot more pressure on the tank compared to in the past.
Yeah. And we spoke a bit about the past versus the present, and there's something brand new in season 1, which is Challenger's Peril, right? And they just nerfed the affix, but basically this kind of like time penalty for each death. They're trying to make deaths way more costly now. What's your predictions for, how would teams think about pools differently going into, this brand new NDI with this new Challenger's Peril? Or is it, people still pull the same way? They just pull big, pull hard. Does it affect your strategy in any way, having these new affix?
I mean, I guess it's a hopeful question. I can only
Oh
give
yeah,
my
I
guess.
can go.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, you go ahead.
personally, like for MDI and TGB settings, it's really frustrating because there's like a 40-second variance on when the debuff can spawn and when you can use it. So I think like you roughly get an idea of when you have it, but it's really hard to plan around it or predict it just because of the variance in it. I think for high keys or like TGP, it's probably more fine because each pull lasts a long time. So you're gonna have this pull just roughly at a different time. But for MDI, it's really annoying playing around it because sometimes you get it when you want it, and sometimes you lose 20 seconds in the key because you don't get it, But I think overall, it's pretty good.
I think you misunderstood hopeful a bit. You don't have the affix at level 12 key, so in TGP you don't even play that affix.
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. For MDI, it's really annoying then.
Yeah.
And Kwasi,
No, I mean,
you asked about deaths, right?
I think it was the
deaths,
death one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, this is kind of tied to, I think, the community feedback about Mythic Plus, because I've never seen, for quite a while now, I've never seen like Mythic Plus community being so vocal about like protesting, people listing like +12s and just declining everyone out of hate. Like, I feel like this is a tangent from MDIs, but I think it's deeply related to the health of Mythic Plus, right? And I think it's an important tangent. Like, you guys are all veterans of the game. Maybe we'll start with Gingy first, maybe.
Okay.
What do you think about this brand new affix system for the broader WoW population, though? Because I feel like there's a lot of angst in the community right now about Mythic Plus.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the fact that you don't have the rotation of, bursting, storming, fortified tyrannical weeks, and things like that. People can actually push keys every week, and it feels nice that way. So I'm a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of the death penalties being so punishing, and I think it's even worse for MDI. Imagine you have a really good run, and one guy dies in the end, and you finish the key before someone else, but you lose 15 seconds for every single death. We had I remember that Halls of Atonement, we had a very sloppy start. We had like 3 deaths or something in the beginning on like the triple shot pool. We ended up finishing the dungeon before it was Ask the Why back then, and we ended up losing the key. We had to come back from a sloppy pull and 3 deaths, and we managed to do that, but we lost because of the death timer. So not only are you losing time from playing, a sloppy pull, having some deaths, you have the death timers on top of that. I think that is not a good thing for MDI specifically, because I mean, if you have a lot of deaths but you still end up timing the key faster than someone else, I think that's an accomplishment and should be rewarded. So I have never really liked the death timers. I remember they implemented them back in the day. I think it started off when people were dying on purpose to get bloodlust back.
Yes. It was in Legion, yeah.
Yeah. But they could just make Sated stay through deaths, which they also did. So I don't really understand. Yeah.
Makes sense. Miraz, you've been Gingy's teammate for many years now. Would you agree with like his views on where Mythic Plus affixes are going?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think it is really weird that now we will see it tomorrow, right? MDI starts, yeah?
Yep.
And I think it will be even more boring to watch when another team dies, because in the past, like Mike said, you could watch a team wipe and still probably maybe make it. But now when a team wipes, it's at least fully over for them, because they wipe, they lose a lot of time, and they get like a minute and a half on the death timer almost. And then you're like, they don't come back. So it's really sad.
Especially because dungeons are like 10 minutes now. Narcotic Wait was just under 10 minutes for the time trial. So 15 seconds is a long time compared to that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. From a percentage standpoint, like the 15 seconds out of like 10 minutes is a very sizable chunk. I think that's a very good point about for viewer experience, having a full wipe pretty much just game over, time to get coffee, So I think that's a good point. Hopefully Blizzard is listening. But going back to you, Mike, I think you mentioned a bit about how you think about the affix for season 1. But if let's say you are thinking of, let's say you're Blizzard, right? You have a Magic Wand. What are maybe some of the changes you make for season 2 for the Mythic Plus affix structure?
Yeah, so I am a big fan of seasonal affixes, but they have been a bit of a hit and miss in some cases. I liked things like Shrouded, for example, which was a pretty straightforward affix, right? You just had some ads spawn in the dungeon, they gave you count, and they gave you stats throughout the dungeon. I was also a big fan of Corruption when you actually had it, because, who doesn't like more haste, more stats, faster gameplay, and more power on your character throughout the dungeon? That's also why I liked Encrypted, where you that was my favorite affix of all time, by the way, where you had options to go for, speed, haste, or cooldown reduction. So I really like those interactive ones. I'm not a big fan of the RNG factors in some of them, like Hopeful touched on, that there is a variance in certain timers. You get the balls at good times, bad times. Sometimes you get huge value for them. Sometimes just because of RNG factors, you don't get it on the same pull that you had it on practice. And those issues, I think they should try and fix, or like going forward, for sure. Awakened was also great, by the way. Awakened was great too.
Fair enough. You guys, any thoughts?
No, I was surprised that Mike said that Encrypted was his favorite affix when, in my opinion, Awakened was a lot cooler with the obelisks and everything, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I guess that allowed for some very like creative routing and whatnot. But I know Mike brought up Esther and kind of teams. And I'd like to kind of transit into that segment because we can't do a prediction for MDI without talking about like who are the hot favorites, right? So obviously, the Mirez and Gigi, while you guys kind of take a break from the competitive scene, any top favorites that you guys have in mind? And this question to maybe we can start hopeful, maybe because I think you're practicing right now, right? We can start with you, and maybe you have gotten some win of how the other teams are doing. Any hot favorites? We'll go hopeful's predictions first. And then maybe we'll do Mirez and Jinji next.
I think personally, no bias, the hottest team right now is Mandatory. They have just owned every tournament so far. I heard time trials didn't go that well, but it's time trials, Aside from us, I think it's definitely Perplex is definitely probably the second team. They did really well in time trials this time around, and they usually do well in like past tournaments like this. And then there's another team with I played with a couple of them with Wexy, and they have a couple new people. I think they're pretty good in third place, and then the fourth team with the Curious team. And I think outside of those top four, Miscount, yeah. I think it kind of drops off. I don't want to flame other teams, but outside of that, I think those are like clear top four. They're going to be top four just in different order, maybe, except number one. But yeah.
Wait, so you're saying number one in time trials is number one MDI?
No, in my predictions, number one is going to be number. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question to Hopeful. Do you think that was just routing? Do you think Perplex has tech, or why were you 1.5 minutes behind?
Oh. At a certain point, we stopped going too hard in it because of, like I was talking about before, like just variances. You could get a better time, but you have to spend 5 hours hoping for good RNG on an affix, and we just didn't think it was worth it,
It's not worth it, right? Yeah. That's what we said sometimes as well, and then we were in the dungeon at 2 a.m. and then that better run appeared at 2 a.m. Yeah.
True.
Yeah, but for the prediction, I think what Hopo said is kind of my opinion as well. I think Mandatory is probably my number one team because they have been playing really good in the past as well. I think they have the most experience together with Perplexed in MDI, which is very important in my opinion. Having like previous experience at MDI saves a lot of time and progress and whatnot in especially preparing for Cup and Glovers. Where, for example, the Kira team like Missed Count, I think they are probably not as good in MDI because they have been playing high keys mainly, and I think they will be really good in TGP, but in my opinion, I would rank them a little bit lower in MDI just because of experience reasons. Yeah.
I
Sounds
agree.
good.
Yeah, I agree. I think Perplexed and Mandatory definitely my favorites. The thing with time trials is that you have a lot of reps, right? And it's very grindy. And many times, you come up with some tech and whatnot, which many times does get showcased in the cups unless teams choose not to get it, or they get a map pool that avoids that dungeon potentially. So it's nice if the teams can keep it at 2 zeros for as much as possible to potentially hide some text in certain keys, right? Because it's always nice to have the information of each map from the other teams, while not giving away your potential tech, because then you might be able to, oh, they had something good here, let's combine that with our strat, or that cooldown timing was actually quite nice, or, oh wait, this mage was pulling this pack instead of the tank and it was a faster stack up. Small tips and tricks like that, it's always nice to adjust to your own strategy. I mean, we've lost an MDI because we accidentally got into third game and had to show our Dawn, for example, which was very unfortunate, right? And then everyone adapted to it, that would have been a free win kind of in the globals, right? So it is nice if you can try and keep that technology to yourself. So it is important to be consistent in the cups as well, even if you're against maybe a little bit weaker teams.
And Gigi, I picked up on something you mentioned about tech. And I think you and your team, you guys are famous for this, right? Like you guys have pulled out some crazy shit in the past. My favorite is definitely the Halls of Valor, kind of like the snap all the way to kind of Odin's room. That's kind of insane. I blew everyone's mind. I kind of wanted to ask, for MDIs, be it for MDIs or TGP, there's all these secret tech. And how the hell do you guys figure out all this shit? Like is it just through kind of brute forcing the dungeon, practice? What goes behind cooking up a strat like that?
The main thing is the build-up knowledge from previous MDIs. So when you look at MDT and when you look at a poll, you have all of these build-up things that you've done in previous MDIs, and they're part of your, let's say, route planning when you're thinking about how you do a dungeon. You look at a poll and then you instantly think, okay, so we used to do a poll like this or whatever. So all of these innovative ideas that you've done in the past, they are part of your thinking going forward in new seasons as well. So instead of them coming up with crazy stuff, they are just part of what we're thinking about when we think about the dungeon. They become, a normal thing, whereas for other people it might be mind-blowing, but we're instantly thinking about snapping and figuring out how we can do certain things. There's a lot of weird things you can snap with. It doesn't even have to be MD or tricks. It can be certain spells that engages in combat with someone. In some cases, it even has delayed travel time. So, for example, in the DH case, last MDI, where you can cast a sigil, take a summon, and then the sigil lands afterwards, and you don't get in combat, right? And then the mob snap to the summon position. So that there's a lot of small tricks like that. It's just about figuring them out in the moment, right? And that comes from experience.
I'd like to follow up with that question because Miraz mentioned something similar, which is the experience, right? We talked about some of the teams, they are very talented on live keys, but maybe when it comes to MDI, they have a bit less experience. And you guys have many years of experience, and hopefully this is not your first tournament either. Maybe I'll start with Miraz first. Kind of walk us through your journey, right? Because you competed in the MDIs many years ago versus, let's say, last year. How does the experience help? Is it about not having any nerves about competing anymore? How exactly does just the years of experience kind of help you have an advantage?
I mean, I would say having no nerves or whatever is probably, that's a bonus, I would say, but it doesn't really help too much, I guess, in my opinion. It's mainly that you go into a dungeon and not even you go into a dungeon. It's mainly you do a dungeon on beta, and because of years of experience, how dungeons get coded and how everything works and how Blizzard designs dungeons and mobs and stuff, you see this guy is probably 1 or 2 melee kicks. Nowadays it's a little bit more straightforward, but let's talk last expansion, where you're okay, this guy, you have 1 melee, you can do 1 melee kick and to stop 1 melee kick. So this guy easily assigned by 1 player. He can solo this guy the whole pull. So on these things you see quite easy by, for example, running just beta dungeons. going through, you play the dungeon a few times, you see everything, and then you also see potential mobs that you can maybe a little bit exploit, some good snaps, or like some NPCs you just out of experience know, or this guy is easy to snap because, for example, he's casting and he's standing still after the cast, or he's not casting and then insta running more or less, and then you can like either drag him or snap him against the wall, like or how mobs behave or whatnot. All of these things I think come into play when you do the dungeons the first time, and with all of that you go into MDI and you open MDT and you're like, okay, this is probably possible. Then you create a made up pool that is most of the time probably too big, but you do it, and then you're like, okay, this is how we expected it. And I think the progress just becomes way faster when it comes to how to set up a pull, how to execute the pull, and how to assign the pull. Where if you don't have any clue about these things, you go in the dungeon, you make a pull in MDT, you assign it, and then most people don't know what to do. Like, I don't know, 2 melee kicks on this one guy, 3 stops on the other, and then you're just in shambles, and then you wipe, you go again, and obviously this takes all a lot more time. Where if you have the experience from the past and someone knows what's up, it's all just way easier to get to the point that you can rep the dungeon, and when you rep the dungeon, it will always become better, right? That's always the main goal of MDI. I think that was also one of the things that we had bad in the MDI that we lost. We were cooking really hard, and I think we had amazing strats, but we had very little reps on all the dungeons, meaning that sometimes mistakes happened that we were not just prepared for, never seen before, or whatever. But if, for example, mandatory, they ran more straightforward strats and they had insane reps like after in short amount of time, and they had really strong performance all around without having too many issues in all these dungeons, right? So yeah, I think that all plays into the experience, I guess. Yeah,
makes sense. And hopefully this is not your first MDI, right? So kind of talk us through what have you learned from your first MDIs until now. Like, do you approach it differently? Are you more prepared for kind of like the reps in, I guess, training, or just playing the tournament itself? Like, how do you view it differently?
Yeah, 100%. When I first, because I played on Legendary last MDI, and I think when I first started, it was like what seemed normal to my teammates were like, it was the first time doing it for me. So like setting up kicks or whatever and getting things in. I think once you start just playing more with a team or just playing more in general, you start just becoming really efficient at a pack. So like you go into a brand new dungeon for the first time, you maybe spend a couple pulls doing the pack and getting it down because everything is kind of very similar. And then after you have it done, after like 2 or 3 pulls, you can start expanding or innovating or just getting more reps in on the pull. And just you're much quicker to like adapt your strategy or like just perfect it than if you were not, like if you were like brand new coming in the MDI.
Makes sense. So, I would like to move on kind of to just kind of enjoying the tournament, because I think this kind of like the last few, kind of questions I like to kind of ask you folks. So I'll start with Gingy first. Again, you've been competing a long time. This time around, you get to finally enjoy MDIs as a spectator. Any like special plans? Are you going to get together with, I guess, some of your buddies like Mirez and just kind of watch the MDIs? What's your plans to kind of just be a spectator?
Wait, my camera just
he popped
died.
smoke bomb.
Give me a second. I think it was my dog. She's under the desk. She just stretched.
No worries. Maybe we'll cover with Mirez first. So Mirez, like, any special plans about how you're gonna enjoy MDIs this time around? Just yourself, or maybe you live stream. Like, what's your plans?
No, we have planned a watch party for the first time. I think in the past it was only that we watched the watch parties afterwards to hear what people had to say, like a little bit of fun content. But now we are the content, watching everyone, of course. We will be going over the tactics. Yeah, maybe a little bit flaming if something is not so good set up, hopefully. I need to watch out. But in general, I think we will just enjoy it, watch it together. Mike has set up like a watch party situation with some people. It will be really nice. And we will be, for the first time, spectators trying to find out what is happening. And we will also be surprised about a lot of things, I assume, because we're not actively doing anything ourselves, right?
Right. I love the fact that you guys are able to provide like the commentary, because you have won MDIs before and you probably have a lot more experience when it comes to like kind of breaking down the technicalities. So I'm sure, those watch parties will be a blast. But Gingy, like, obviously you planned the watch party. What's your feelings going into the first time as a spectator in a long time for the MDIs?
So I've done watch parties in the past, and they're pretty I like them because you can just sit back, enjoy the content instead of like watching it as a competitor. This time around, I can be open about everything, which is gonna make the content better, right? I can, like I said, analyze and discuss what the teams are doing, how they're doing it, and things like that. And I can give way more information away to the community. Whereas before, I had to hold back because I didn't want to leak anything, right? I was looking at what the teams were doing, and I knew in my head, well, you can also do this and that, and but I couldn't share any of those things because that was things we came up with ourselves, right? There's probably some information I'll be missing not playing MDI, right? Because the teams are there doing it, so I won't know everything, obviously, but I'm sure a lot of the experience that we had from the past will be something that the community can learn about and hopefully make the watch party a bit more interesting.
I'm sure it'll be a blast. So thanks for sharing that. Let me kind of switch gears here to Hopeful, because Hopeful, you don't have the benefit of enjoying the watch parties like us. You are in the hot seat and you're competing. I want to ask you, so this is the first time in a long while we don't have the powerhouse kind of Echo team, Mirez and Gingy and Co competing. And there's different ways to view this, right? One is potentially like there's less hype because these boys, they have tons of fans. But there's also the other perspective, which is, does it motivate more people to compete in the MDIs? Because now they think that, oh shit, now that the Echo boys are out, maybe we have a chance of winning now. Like, how do you guys think about it?
I think it would motivate a lot more people because there's like one less roadblock. Echo's been winning so many. Basically, it was like, oh, if you don't think you can beat Echo, why even compete? So I think with them out and like one less good team, I think it's more easy. Like the barrier to entry for MDI is easier because there's just one less good team. Yeah.
Right. And I'd like to ask maybe an open question, maybe to Hopeful, and then maybe Mirez and Gingy, love to get your thoughts. So I think I've seen an interesting thing emerge. I believe Doki and Co is running him now as a tank. So it's like kind of an NA-EU hybrid. How, as a competitor, Hopeful, firstly, you first, like, what do you think about kind of hybrid teams like that? And I'd love to get Gingy and Mirez's thoughts on that after that.
Hybrid as in just EU NA teams?
Yeah, EU and plus NA, yeah.
I think as long as like they mesh together well and vibe together well, it's fine. I don't think it really matters much. Ping is definitely a factor, but I think vibing together and just meshing well with one another is way more important.
Makes sense. Gingy, what do you think? Like, is the latency a handicap, or it doesn't really matter at the end of the day?
Well, I've always played on EU servers, so I can't really say if it's a big problem. Hopeful can speak on it if it matters like a lot or not. But if it's not too bad, I don't think if you go above like 120 to 150, I would get really annoyed playing with it. But if you're like close to 100 and below, I think it's bearable.
Sounds good. Mirez, any thoughts on like this hybrid mix of like NA-EU? Because obviously I think like culturally there's a bit of differences. I've always heard like EU teams, like the Echo folks, like I know Gingy, you short call off like kicks and stuff. But on the NA side, like sometimes a lot of it depends on the tank. But culturally, is there an issue like for hybrid teams to exist, or is that actually a good thing? What do you think, Mirez?
No, I don't think so. If everyone in the team is kind of on the same level and knows what's going on, I think that's the most important thing, and then there's no issue, right? Maybe some jokes hit different from EU and NA, and maybe some people don't know some joke that is more NA based or EU based, whatever. But I think as long as the people are on the same level playing together, it shouldn't be an issue. But I can say, I think so far most of the hybrid teams always disbanded, right? I think in the time, I think the Robin team also disbanded in the thing. So, and yeah, I think it's mainly the time zone issue. Yeah,
sounds good. And sorry,
no,
go ahead, Gigi.
I was just had a funny story. I think the humor can sometimes be very different. Like I remember in season 2 of Shadowlands, we were playing a little bit of a home cooked team because Maris couldn't play and Lix also. Oh, what? I think Lix or Fragments. I don't remember. Yeah,
one of them.
But we made a team with Onesie and JPC, right? So we were also like a hyper team back then. And I guess when I'm shot calling, I'm serious. But like what they didn't understand that sometimes I was making jokes throughout the dungeon. So I switched from being serious to making jokes, and sometimes with a serious voice being sarcastic. And they never picked up on it. And I thought that was really funny because they thought I was. Sometimes I don't know what they would be thinking. Like, what the fuck's going on? Is he, But I don't know if it was an American thing or just knowing the person more than anything. I think there's a lot of maybe more sarcasm in EU. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but that's like something I picked up on at least.
Yeah, there's definitely very different vibes. I think watching EU comms and NA comms, that's for sure. This is an interesting statement. We're coming up to the hour mark, so I kind of want to just kind of leave it to closing remarks from you folks, right? We'll start with hopeful because you're competing. What's your mood going into the tournament, right? It's starting this kind of weekend. How are you feeling? Confident? How do you feel about practice so far?
Definitely confident. Yeah, going into we're not playing this weekend. We play Cup B, but definitely very confident. Yeah, it's kind of weird because I've only kind of played Mage before. It was just always good, and then going to this, I'm like practicing and playing like 5 or 6 different specs and classes. So it's a little weird that because I'm focusing on specs and then the dungeon when before I could only focus on the dungeon, because I already know how to play the spec. So that was a little uneasy when we first started practice, but I think going into it now, I'm pretty confident on like all the specs I've been playing and then going into MDI too.
Right. And maybe closing questions to Mirez and Gingy here. So you guys are spectators. What do you think is the dungeon that is capable of the biggest surprise in terms of tech that we will see from the tournament out of the 8 dungeons? Let's start with Mirez maybe.
The biggest tech. I mean, it depends what they allow. I think that's one of the things. But I would say in terms of allowing, maybe Dawnbreaker, because Dawnbreaker has endless amount of mobs. And maybe you can do some cool snaps or some cool pulls. There's endless houses. I would say Dawnbreaker. I think Dawnbreaker has some interesting things going on, but also all the mobs are just not too hot to play. So maybe not, but at least I could be surprised.
I think Grim Battle, some people might come up with some innovative way of doing the Dragon Gauntlet, flying on it. I think it will be interesting to see there. There's one thing I've thought about, and it gets me back to when we did a Taldazar, where we utilized the reverse snapping, similar to what we did once in what's called Waycrest Manor as well, where instead of you snapping mobs through the tank gets aggro, and then you misdirect the boss, and the boss forces both like the tank to the boss position immediately, and then all of the mob snaps with them. There's a similar mechanic on the second boss when the second boss gets tagged. So I don't know if you tag the boss, he teleports you to the boss platform. If all of the mobs that you're in combat with snaps with it, that could be pretty interesting. I don't know if that's a viable strat or whatnot, or if it even works. But it was something I thought about at least. So yeah, I mean, I'm just hyped to see it this time around. I'm just gonna enjoy the show, to be honest.
Sounds good. Those were good answers, and it's been a great hour. So before we kind of wrap up, this is where we kind of like thank our sponsors. So this echo chamber is entirely only possible thanks to Elgato Wave. So it's entirely brought to you by those good folks over there. So a big thank you. I also like to say a big thank you to Mirez, Gingy, and Hopeful. I know Mirez and Gingy, you were in the middle of kind of like attempting high keys before you joined you for this kind of episode. So we'll kind of release you back to breaking keys now. But jokes aside, Mirez, you can also kind of like get out of that very hot costume for Halloween. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. I think it was a good discussion. And thanks for watching for the viewers out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I guess that's a wrap. So yeah, thank you. Thanks folks. See you soon.